Few people anticipated that an armored car, initially assembled from British components using armor plates of Russian manufacture, would be operated through 3 military conflicts. The vehicle was used during the First World War, the period of revolutionary events, and in the initial period of a new era. Its modifications and operation demonstrated the engineering ingenuity and adaptability of military solutions characteristic of that period. Thus, an armored car was created, which later became known as the Austin-Putilov. In August 1914, the outbreak of conflict in Europe was accompanied by intense artillery shelling. It became evident that the methods of warfare employed by traditional armies were insufficient. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery faced difficulties in countering the firepower and speed of modern machine guns. Armed forces needed means that provided both protection and mobility. During this period, armored cars, mobile armored platforms equipped with machine gun armament, were deployed for the first time on the fields of Belgium. Their appearance indicated a change in the nature of military operations. The Russian Empire recognized the prospect of a prolonged conflict. At the outbreak of the First World War, the Russian Empire possessed one of the largest vehicle fleets in the world, totaling 711 automobiles and just over 100 motorcycles. However, these resources were insufficient to meet the needs of a front extending thousands of kilometers. The only domestic automobile factory, Russo-Balt, produced just over 100 vehicles per year, and the troops experienced a shortage of various supplies, including tires and fuel. Consequently, the procurement of armored cars from abroad was deemed necessary. In the autumn of 1914, Colonel Sekretyov concluded a contract with the British firm Austin for the supply of 48 armored vehicles. The contract was signed on September 29th, and production began in Great Britain just 1 month later. Production was carried out within a tight time frame. By mid-October, the first armored cars were ready. The reason was that they were not assembled from scratch. The Austin Company used the ready-made chassis of its passenger cars, reinforcing them with armor plates. Steel plates 3 to 4 millimeters thick were installed on these chassis, and a Maxim machine gun was mounted in each of the 2 turrets. The 2 turrets allowed for simultaneous firing in different directions, increasing the vehicle's firepower. The armored car carried 40 boxes of ammunition belts, equivalent to 10,000 rounds. The wheels were massive, made of wood, of artillery type, with rims for rubber bands to improve off-road capability. During the first combat operations, both the advantages and disadvantages of the new equipment were identified. The armored car had a significant psychological impact on enemy infantry, but its armor was penetrated by rifle bullets at close range. The engine overheated, and the rear axle failed under the stress of its weight. Military specialists of the Russian Empire assessed the potential of the vehicle while noting the need for modifications. At the Izhorsky plant in Petrograd, the armor protection was reinforced. The new plates were 6 to 7 millimeters thick, which led to an increase in the vehicle's weight from 1.5 to almost 4 tons. However, this also increased the armored car's survivability. Engineers of the Russian Empire introduced other structural changes, including an extended frame for increased stability, enlarged tires, and an engine with a power of 50 horsepower instead of the original 30 horsepower, as well as improved observation devices. A significant improvement was the implementation of a second steering control. On the battlefield, the heavy armored car had difficulty maneuvering under fire. A solution was developed to install a second steering wheel in the rear of the hull. Now the vehicle could move into battle in reverse and retreat forwards. This provided a significant tactical advantage. A similar technical solution was not used in the armies of other states. Upon reviewing the introduced modifications, the British side acknowledged that military specialists of the Russian Empire not only operated armored cars, but also actively worked on their improvement. This case became an example of the exchange of engineering solutions between allies. By the end of 1915, the impracticality of relying on foreign supplies was recognized. The need for armored cars was estimated in hundreds of units. During that period, a decision was made to begin production of these vehicles on Russian territory. Chassis were supplied from England, armor was produced at the Izhorsky plant, and assembly was entrusted to the Putilovsky plant in Petrograd, one of the leading industrial enterprises of that time. The initial plan envisaged the production of 10 vehicles per month, with a total volume of 60 armored cars. Of these, 2/3 were to use a half-track chassis designed by Kegres, an engineer of Russian origin who worked in France. The half-track modifications of the Austin were intended for universal use, ensuring passability over snow, mud, and sand. By September 1916, work on the blueprints was completed and the assembly process began. The project represented a significant step in the development of local machine building. However, further developments introduced adjustments. The February Revolution led to a disruption of logistics chains. Only 20 chassis were received from England, after which production was suspended. After the change of power in the country, enterprises ceased operations, materials lay idle, and personnel, including engineers, remained unpaid. At that point, the project for the Austin armored car, manufactured in this territory, was considered halted. Nevertheless, despite the general disorganization, the Izhorsky plant continued work on armoring the chassis. The assembly of hulls was carried out manually, in some cases using components from old stocks. By March 1918, work on armoring 2 chassis was completed, with 3 more in a state of partial readiness. Despite a 1-year delay, the acquired experience was retained. The best engineering solutions developed during the preceding 3 years of military conflict were integrated into the Austin design. The machine gun turrets were positioned diagonally to expand the firing arc. The roof design was changed to a gable type, which prevented the turret from jamming with spent casings. The machine guns had an elevation angle of up to 80 degrees, allowing fire against aerial targets. Visibility for the drivers was improved, and the interior of the hull was lined with felt to minimize shrapnel ricochet. The armor thickness was 7.5 millimeters, with an engine power of 50 horsepower. The fully equipped and fueled Putilovets Austin-Putilov armored car had a mass of 4.5 tons and developed a speed of up to 55 kilometers per hour. This was comparable to the speed characteristics of passenger cars of that period. The crew consisted of 5 people, a commander, 2 drivers, and 2 machine gunners. By the time the first production models of Austin armored vehicles were released, the civil conflict was already ongoing in the country. In late 1918, amidst general difficulties, the Izhorsky plant continued the armor plating of hulls. An order existed for 41 armored vehicles. However, there was only enough armor in stock for 20 machines. In the summer of 1919, due to fuel shortages, the question of transferring some production work to the Sormovsky plant in Nizhny Novgorod was considered. Nevertheless, work continued at the Petrograd plant. By autumn, thanks to intensive efforts, the plant produced 29 finished armored vehicles, as well as 5 units assembled from pre-war components. In parallel, half-tracked versions based on the Kegres system chassis were put into operation. 5 such armored vehicles were produced in 1919 and another 7 in the following year. A distinctive feature of the design was the rear road wheels connected by a flexible rubber track, which ensured increased off-road capability. These machines demonstrated the ability to move through snow and mud in conditions where standard automobiles lost mobility. The assembly process for all Austin armored vehicles was predominantly manual. An intensive work process was noted in the production workshops. The noise of riveting, the processing of heated metal sheets, as well as the characteristic smells of oil and kerosene. Workers often arrived at the production facility directly after shifts on the barricades and commenced their duties. Each machine was dispatched to the front with an individual name painted on its side. Examples of such names include Fighter of the Revolution, Working Russia, and Petrograd Defender. By March 1919, these machines constituted approximately 1/3 of the armored vehicles in service with the Red Army, 110 units out of 369, not counting those unserviceable or undergoing repairs. In the White Armies in the south of the country, Austin armored vehicles comprised almost half of all armored transport, 18 out of 37 machines. Nevertheless, an important factor was that the equipment continued to function despite the general disorganization. Amid political instability, when governments and symbols changed, Austin-Putilov's armored vehicles remained in operation. Shifting under the control of various sides of the conflict, they maintained their effectiveness as weaponry. The design of these machines proved sufficiently successful, which prompted each side to strive for their preservation, even with limited access to fuel and spare parts. By the end of 1919, armored vehicles were deployed in the defense of Petrograd against forces commanded by Yudenich. Several machines covered the approaches to the city, providing fire support to infantry with machine guns. Among them were also half-tracked modifications, demonstrating the ability to move through deep snow where the movement of other means was difficult. These armored vehicles played a significant role in the city's defense, helping to contain the offensive until reinforcements arrived. Over time, their operational experience increased, while the machine's service life was depleting. However, even worn-out Austins with damaged armor plates continued to perform their functions. Their repairs were carried out directly in field workshops using improvised means for replacing parts. The operability of this equipment was maintained thanks to the efforts of personnel who understood its strategic value and role in the conflict. By the end of 1920, during the final combat operations in the Southern Territories, Austin-Putilov type armored vehicles were still in operation. They participated in battles in the Crimea and northern Taurida regions, accompanying cavalry units, breaking through enemy defensive lines and capturing trophies. Thus, the armored vehicle, produced at Petrograd factories, became a weapon that influenced the outcome of many battles of the Civil War. This conflict became a test of endurance and structural strength for the Austin-Putilov armored vehicle. When the territory disintegrated, these machines came into the possession of opposing armies and were used against each other. Vehicles produced at the same factory, the Putilov plant, were used by opposing sides, and the effectiveness of their deployment largely depended on the training of the crews. In the spring of 1919, during intense combat operations on the northern approaches to Petrograd, Austin-Putilov armored vehicles were among the first units deployed. Roads damaged by artillery fire were impassable for standard vehicles, but armored vehicles armed with 2 Maxim machine guns ensured forward progress. Their appearance at enemy positions often had a decisive impact on the outcome of engagements. Armor protected against bullets, and concentrated fire forced the enemy to abandon fortifications. Although the number of these machines was limited, each was valued as a unit comparable in firepower to an artillery battery. Unit commanders noted that the sudden appearance of an armored vehicle on the battlefield often interrupted or slowed down the enemy's offensive. One successful maneuver could disrupt the attack of an entire battalion. Maneuverability and the ability to fire in different directions made the Austin-Putilov an effective combat tool, especially in scattered engagements where a quick response was critically important. In the autumn of the same year, 3 half-track armored vehicles participated in repelling Udenich's offensive on Petrograd. The machines moved through damaged streets, covering infantry, evacuating the wounded, and delivering ammunition to the soldiers. In low temperatures, engines were started by heating the crankcase with bonfires, as otherwise the oil would thicken, making it difficult to start the engine. Crews spent the night directly inside the armored vehicles, sheltering from wind and shelling. Austin-Putilov armored vehicles also played a significant role in the south of the territory. In the summer and autumn of 1920, they participated intensively in battles in northern Taurida. Dusty road conditions, high temperatures, and fuel shortages created significant operational difficulties. In some cases, to preserve the running gear, the armored vehicle was towed by horses until gasoline could be found. Despite this, the crews did not abandon their vehicles. The value of armored vehicles was such that they were endeavored to be used as effectively as possible, up to the complete exhaustion of their resources. Throughout the entire period of the conflict, the design demonstrated high versatility. On some vehicles, a light Hotchkiss cannon of 37 mm caliber was installed instead of one machine gun. Such armament increased the striking capabilities of the Austin armored car. One volley could hit machine gun nests or light fortifications. Modifications of this kind were carried out locally, outside of factory conditions, which attested to the structural strength and adaptability of the basic platform. Servicemen called these armored cars "iron comrades." Their operational qualities were rated as high. Even when armor was penetrated and engine power was lost, the vehicle retained its ability to move. Reports from that period contain numerous examples of individual Austin armored cars holding back enemy advances, providing protection for artillery batteries, or breaking through encirclements. There were instances when the entire crew perished in battle, yet the armored car remained operational, and new fighters occupied it just a day later. Each Austin-Putilov armored car had its own name. Inscriptions on the armor, such as Volya, will, Besposhadny, merciless, Krasnaya Molnia, red lightning, Severny Geroi, northern hero, reflected their role and perception among the troops. Sometimes these same vehicles later ended up with the opposing side, with inscriptions painted over and a new emblem. During the Civil War, armored cars repeatedly changed hands, commanders, crews, and paint schemes, yet continued to be used in combat operations. The design, developed in Petrograd, was characterized by its reliability. Even after years of operation, the vehicle bodies maintained their shape, and the rivets withstood the loads. In conditions where foreign-made equipment quickly failed due to a lack of spare parts, Austin armored cars continued to function. They were repaired in field workshops using available materials. Gears were manufactured by hand. Armor plates were replaced with steel plates from steam locomotives, and Army tires from carts were installed instead of original ones. By the end of 1920, many vehicles were heavily worn, but their operation continued. On some Austins, engines were replaced, adapting parts from trucks, and these vehicles returned to service. When the final battles took place in Crimea, older modification armored cars were still used in combat conditions. They were used for reconnaissance, guarding headquarters, escorting convoys, and in strike operations. Unusual situations were sometimes observed. In one battle, opponents closed to within a few tens of meters, with both sides firing from identical vehicles. Descriptions of such engagements are found in eyewitness diaries. Bullets ricocheted off the armor, turrets rotated, casings jingled, and the roar of engines hung over the field. Despite significant losses, by the end of 1921, The Red Army possessed about 109 Austin armored cars of various modifications. These vehicles, having undergone long-term operation, continued to demonstrate combat qualities despite the exhaustion of their original resource. After the conflict concluded, they continued to be used in training units, at maneuvers, and in parades. Thus, the armored car, developed during the First World War, withstood the trials of the Civil War and demonstrated the durability of its design. By the early 1920s, Austin-Putilov armored cars represented examples of equipment with a long service period. They had seen service on the fronts of the First World War and during the events of the Civil War, yet they still remained operational, bearing the marks of past battles, shell holes, dents, traces of repair. After peace was established in the country, these vehicles were perceived as a symbol of strength and stability necessary for the young republic. After the end of the Civil War, over 100 Austin armored cars of various modifications were listed in the Red Army. Some of them still participated in battles with Polish troops in 1920. These engagements showed that even heavily worn armored cars were capable of performing combat missions. Crews valued the vehicles for their simplicity and reliability, and commanders for their ability to operate effectively in various conditions. By 1921, armored vehicles began to show signs of moral obsolescence. The emergence of new types of weaponry necessitated the need for vehicles with increased speed, cross-country capability, and more powerful protection. Despite these trends, armored cars of the Austin type, which were in operation, continued to be used. They were transferred to military educational institutions, used in maneuvers, and in some cases deployed for the protection of government facilities. In the outskirts of Moscow and Petrograd, these old armored cars with two turrets were regularly observed moving along cobblestone pavements. One of the well-known stories associated with this equipment dates back to this period. In the spring of 1917, after V.I. Lenin's arrival from immigration at the Finland station in Petrograd, an armored car of the local garrison was used for his speech. Workers and soldiers gathered on the platform listened to the speech while standing near the armored car, which was equipped with turrets and machine guns. This episode gained widespread recognition and became firmly established in historical memory, and the armored car itself became associated with the event, receiving the unofficial name Leninsky. After V.I. Lenin's death in 1924, the party leadership decided to locate the aforementioned vehicle with the aim of preserving it as a monument. Search efforts continued for a prolonged period. Information in the archives was fragmentary or contradictory. Some documents were missing, and the exact identification numbers of the armored cars were not recorded. In 1939, a specimen was discovered that outwardly matched the description of the armored car used by V.I. Lenin. The vehicle underwent thorough repair, during which damaged hull elements were replaced. Subsequently, it was mounted on a pedestal near the V.I. Lenin Museum in Leningrad. As a result of the restoration, the vehicle acquired a renewed appearance, polished armor, new machine gun turrets, and fresh paintwork. In 1940, the armored car was placed by the museum walls, where it functioned as a monument to revolutionary events. For many, it symbolized a pivotal moment in the country's history. However, only decades later did historians establish that this armored car could not have been the vehicle from which V.I. Lenin delivered his speech. Experts determined that based on characteristic construction details, the diagonal arrangement of turrets, the shape of the frontal plates, and the features of the lining, the vehicle was manufactured by the Izyorsky plant in June 1919, which was more than 2 years after the described events. The authentic armored car from which V.I. Lenin addressed the people has not been preserved. Its traces were lost during the Civil War, when armored cars repeatedly changed ownership and were often put out of action in combat operations. Nevertheless, the discovered specimen represented no less historical interest. It bore the name Enemy of Capital and possessed a significant combat history. This armored car was part of one of the Red Army units and participated in combat operations against Polish formations in the summer of 1920. After these battles, it was preserved, repaired, and deployed for garrison duty. This likely contributed to its escaping disposal, to which many similar vehicles were subjected by the end of the 1920s. By the early 1930s, armored cars of the Austin type were gradually being withdrawn from military service. They were replaced by more modern armored vehicles equipped with powerful engines and radio communication systems. Nevertheless, even during that period, dozens of old vehicles were listed in accounting documents as still being in service. As of March 1, 1931, the Red Army had in its inventory 78 wheeled and 4 half-track Austin-Putilov armored cars. Their operational lifespan was approaching its end. However, the process of their decommissioning was not hastened. Each of these vehicles was considered a symbol of the victories and heroism of that period. By the beginning of the Great Patriotic War, the armored car Enemy of Capital was on a pedestal in Leningrad next to a museum. The city was subjected to siege and massive bombardments, which caused significant destruction. Yet the vehicle withstood even these events. Despite the general destruction, the armored car remained intact. It was not dismantled and was not used for defensive purposes. It remained in its place. After the lifting of the siege, the object underwent several restorations. In the 1950s, the armored car was restored according to factory blueprints. Worn parts were replaced while preserving the original rivets and hull elements. Subsequently, its location changed. In 1992, this armored car was transferred to the Museum of Artillery, Engineer, and Signal Corps in St. Petersburg, where it remains to this day. Currently, this armored car is recognized as one of the few surviving examples of its type. The vehicle participated in battles of the Civil War. Its subsequent history is linked to its use as a symbol of the city's resilience during its siege, which reflected its role as an example of a technical solution of its era. By the mid-1930s, Austin-Putilov type armored cars were withdrawn from service in the armed forces and replaced by more modern models. Despite being decommissioned, examples of this equipment continued to be used in military educational institutions for studying their design and operating principles. Most of these vehicles were scrapped. Only a few examples have survived. One of the surviving examples, named Armored Car Enemy of Capital, is one of the few representatives of its class that have survived to our time. This armored car participated in 3 military conflicts, including the period of the city's siege, and has survived to the present day. The vehicle's design withstood the impact of events from the Revolutionary period, civil conflicts, and bombardments. The metal of this combat vehicle is a testament to the engineering approach that allowed for the creation of a design ahead of its time. The history of this type of armored car reflects the processes of technical development and production efforts of that era. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe so that you do not miss new stories.